Okay folks, we've got something today that's different, something we haven't seen before, and no, I'm not referring to that beautiful 1960s piece of kitchen furniture. I'm referring to this particular rifle. Here's a bit of a question for you folks. Which English rifle, English military bolt-action magazine rifle do we have here? And it's not a Lee Enfield. It's a 303 English bolt-action magazine rifle. Well, this rifle, when introduced in 1888, was that early and that fundamental that its original designation was Magazine Rifle Mark I, introduced in 1888 and approved in 1889. Later on, I think it was in 1891 or 1892, when they came out with a later version of this rifle, they gave it the name to which it's known to history, which is the Magazine Lee Metford, sometimes just known as the Lee Metford. Alright folks, we start by looking at the receiver, and you can see that those of us who are familiar with Lee Enfield rifles and the later bolt-action rifles will see that there are some similarities and a lot of differences. The bolt has a dust cover over it. We see that most of only the long toms really, and some of the carbines had the dust cover. Carbine, sorry Ed. But this, I'm not sure why they originally needed a dust cover. Maybe because they thought it was a very complex piece of machinery. They want to keep the dust out in places like the Sudan and all of those other places in the far-flung empire. It has a magazine cutoff, which we've examined in earlier videos, and I'll show you again today. It has the familiar magazine, but there's a difference there as well. And so I'll show you what happens when you open the bolt. As we see, being the Lee action designed by James Paris Lee, a Scot who emigrated to the United States, it cocks on close, so when you open the bolt, the cocking piece doesn't go to the cock position. That has to be done when it's drawn back. So I draw the bolt back there, and we'll have a look at the butt socket and see what we can see. As the camera tries to focus, it looks a lot worse than it actually is. It's got with the pitting, it's mainly discoloration rather than pitting. So the crown and the VR for Queen Victoria. Enfield, 1889, 1 star. So this was built in 1889 as a Magazine Rifle Mark I, and later converted to the 1 star configuration. When this rifle was built, black powder ammunition was the go. So it used the first of the 303 cartridges, which was a round-nosed bullet, propelled by black powder. Later on, when they came out with nitrocellulose and the other non-black powdery powders, or whatever you want to call them, cordite and the like, propellants, they changed the barrel. They had various things because the Metford barreling, rifling in the barrel, which we see as we look down towards the front, don't see the rifling of course, but that's a barrel with Metford rifling, wasn't very good for cordite, which burnt hotter and eroded the rifling in the barrel. So they came out with a new type of rifling, which was the Enfield rifling. So you couple the Enfield rifled barrel with the Lee action, what do you get? Lee Enfield. Now I'll have a bit of a look and we'll see where the magazine cutoff is. And we see something different about the magazine in there. You can see the magazine plate in there. And of course the mag cutoff, as we've seen in earlier videos, it's closed here. So that prevents any ammunition, any rounds that are in the magazine from coming up, so they can be chambered when you push the bolt back forward. And thus it would be used as a single loader, because at this stage you had to get permission from your NCO or your officer to use the magazine. So you hold that down. It's a little difficult actually, with one hand, and there you can use the magazine. So that's the magazine cutoff. And they thought at this point that they needed to have a cutout in the wood, a bit of a ground out section in the wood, so that you could have easier grip on the magazine cutoff, but later they found they didn't need it. We start at the muzzle of the rifle. That foresight, I'm not exactly sure of the details there, has the bayonet lug, and I'll show you how that works a little later. And we head back down towards over the wood. I take it the idea of needing fully stocked rifles but not needing the handguard was such because barrels would get hot, but you're holding it from underneath, so it doesn't really matter. Here's the rear sight, and I'll show you that a bit closer. Rear sight is graduated out to 1800 yards. A bit hard to see, but it's on the left. I'll show it down so the sun picks out the numbering a little better, and you just slide this forward to the particular point you want. Line up the V-notch with the foresight blade, and away you go. And there's the screw for the volley sights, and I'll show you those in a couple of minutes. The handguard is interesting. Later rifles had forward and rear handguards, but this one only has one. They found with the Mark I of the magazine Lee Metfords, as they were later to become, there were problems with the handguard splitting, and that was because soldiers were using bayonets to try and lever them open, the handguards off, so they could clean them. And they found one of the things they had to do was see how it's rounded at the front there. They rounded it so it was easier for the soldier to get his fingers under and remove the handguard there. And there's the rifle with the handguard removed. And here we see some various details on the receiver. I can't even make out that 105D or something seems to be the serial. Hard to see. It has a BSA commercial proof or BSA proof on the barrel there, and I'll show you the. So we might just have a look down the rifle from the left hand side. The forward sling swivel, bayonet lug, going back down the wood, volley sight forward dial and pointer, and there's the groove in the handguard on both sides to allow it to be held easier. Then back to the receiver and the familiar trigger group, and then back down the buttstock. Now I'll show you something interesting about this magazine. At first, when you look at the magazine, it looks just like your typical Lee Enfield magazine from the side. But when you look at it from underneath, you notice in the front, it has a rounded front on it. It has a loop there, which was used with a chain to attach it to the rifle, because that shows, as we know, that it was only to be taken out for cleaning. And interestingly enough, now look at the top and you see something interesting. Unlike all of the later magazines, this has a single row of 8 rounds rather than the twin row holding 10 rounds. So it's a single stacker. Fascinating, really, the way that is. And the rib on the back there is much like the later magazines. For the Mark II of the Lee Metford, they widened the receiver area. So when you look at that under here, it's quite narrow because that's just for the single stacker, and it was widened later for the dual stack. And we might just have a little look down the buttstock on the right hand side. It has a stock disc. I'll see if the camera will focus. It's 5/1892 over IRI over 62. So I'm not sure which unit, regiment, whatever IRI was. Maybe someone out there can tell me. And it has a butt plate with the trap there for the storage of the pour through and the oil bottle, I suppose. Another little interesting thing about this particular rifle is when they were introduced, like most of the earlier English rifles, it had a cleaning rod. A cleaning rod which was, you can see in the end of the bayonet lug there, you can see the hole. And actually when you turn the rifle over, you can see that there's a groove along there, and that's where the cleaning rod went. When they changed them to the Mark I Star, they renamed the cleaning rod the clearing rod. And so that was removed. So they didn't need the cleaning rod, and thus they were able to change the bayonets as well. So another look down the right. Did someone say bayonet? The bayonet that is with this particular rifle is a pattern 1888, and this is a Mark II. So when the cleaning rod was abolished, they changed the bayonets that they'd issued with the rifles earlier. And so this is a Mark II. It has rivets, it has a clearing hole in the pommel rather than on the grips. It has the double-sided edged blade. And it's an Enfield. I'll just see if you can see there. And hang on a sec. ER King Edward 1902. So it's a pattern 1888, made fairly late in life, before the pattern 1903 bayonet came. The length of this rifle is such that I have to stand right back here to get the whole thing in the picture. But it's very much a rifle of empire. And we'll scan down again along this side. And again, there's the Vegemite. And I'm delighted to have been able to bring you a presentation of the magazine rifle Mark I, which later became the magazine Lee Metford. So folks, again, I'm always open to criticism, to correction, to advice, to suggestions. So leave a comment at the end of this video and we'll see what we can do. Thanks very much, folks.